I had been peeling carrots since 6 in the morning when I realized they probably wouldn't notice if I didn't cook at all. By then, the roast was already marinating in Dijon and rosemary. The apple pie crust was chilling in the fridge, and the linen napkins, the good ones, embroidered by my sister in 1963, were neatly folded on the edge of the table. I'd cleaned the entire downstairs the night before, even scrubbed the baseboards and changed the curtains. Not that anyone would notice, but still. They were due around 5. My daughter Caroline, her husband Martin, and the 2 grandkids, Max and Lily. It had been 6 months since their last visit. A quick weekend stop, just enough time to unload laundry, argue about who would sleep where, and disappear to a ski lodge for most of Saturday. "But we wanted to see you," she'd said, kissing my cheek in a rush. This was the only weekend that worked. So when Caroline called last week and said they'd be passing through again, I said, "Let me cook." I said it like it was my idea, like I didn't know they wouldn't stay long. All morning I worked in silence, with the old radio playing soft jazz and the windows open to let the cinnamon smell drift out. I set the table at 4 sharp, each plate with care, each glass without a smudge. I'd even made Max's favorite green beans, the ones I used to sneak into his lunchbox when he was small. At 5:15, their car pulled up. I wiped my hands, checked my lipstick, and opened the door with the kind of smile you save for birthdays and homecomings. Max gave a quick wave, Lily was on her phone, and Martin nodded from the driver's seat. Caroline stepped out first. "Hi, Mom," she said, not looking at me, already rummaging in her bag. "You made good time," I said. "I thought the traffic from Albany would be worse." "Oh, it was fine. We actually stopped and grabbed something to eat. This place on the turnpike with amazing sandwiches." "Hope you understand." "Hope you understand." She said it like she was apologizing for forgetting to buy milk, not for dismissing the meal I'd been planning since Tuesday. I didn't say a word. I just nodded and stepped aside. "Come in." They came in with their bags, jackets, noise. Carolyn kissed my cheek in passing, heading straight for the guest room. Max dropped his backpack on the couch. Lily disappeared to the bathroom. Martin scrolled his phone. No one even looked at the table. I stood there for a moment. Just stood. Then I turned, walked into the dining room, and began to clear it. One plate at a time. Folded the napkins, slid the roast back into the fridge, covered the pie. I closed the kitchen door behind me. In the quiet that followed, I sat down at the little table by the window, the one Derek and I always used for breakfast, and poured myself a cup of tea. From the hallway, I could hear them talking about ski passes, some neighbor's new car, Lily's upcoming test. Not one word about dinner, or the smell in the house, or me. I looked down at my hands, still smelling faintly of cinnamon and garlic, and thought, this is what it means to be an afterthought. Then I got up, rinsed my cup, and started writing a list. Not for groceries or things I needed to fix. No, a different kind of list. I ate a slice of the pie alone that night, not because I wanted dessert, I wasn't hungry, but because I needed to taste something I made, something that mattered, even if only to me. It was too sweet, I thought. I'd used Derek's old recipe, but he always liked things sweeter than I did. Funny how I'd kept making it his way, even 16 years after he passed. Old habits and old love, they stick, whether you want them to or not. The list I'd started earlier lay beside me on the table, its heading scribbled in large, shaky letters. What I've given. Underneath, just a few lines so far. Caroline's first car. Max's summer camp. Lily's braces. and last year's down payment for their new place in Connecticut, the temporary investment, as Caroline called it. My name wasn't on the deed, of course. "It's just paperwork, Mom," she'd said. "You know it's really yours, too." I underlined that last one 3 times. They didn't even stay the night. Around 9, Caroline poked her head into the kitchen, where I was rinsing dishes I hadn't used. "We're actually going to head out tonight," she said. "There's a chance of snow tomorrow, and Martin's got that call early." I nodded. No protest, no surprise, just a quiet understanding. They hadn't come for me. They'd come to pass through. Caroline hugged me with one arm. "Sorry we didn't eat. You know how road trips go. I promise next time we'll make it a real dinner." I smiled. Sure. They left like they arrived. A blur of zippers and duffel bags, hurried footsteps, murmured goodbyes. Lily barely looked up from her phone. Max mumbled, "Thanks, Grandma," before the door shut behind them. The silence that followed was thick, but not unfamiliar. This wasn't the first time I'd felt like background noise in my own house. It was just the first time I let it sink in. I went back to the table and sat down again, looked at the list, turned the page over and started a second one. This one I titled, "What I've Asked For." It stayed mostly blank. A phone call on my birthday, a visit in spring just one weekend, a framed photo of the grandkids for Christmas. Nothing more, nothing unreasonable, nothing I got. I stayed up late that night. Not because I couldn't sleep, I was tired enough to collapse, but because the house felt like it was speaking to me. The ticking of the old kitchen clock, the creak of the radiator, the wind tapping at the back door like a forgotten friend. I walked into the front room and lit the gas fireplace, sat down in Derek's old armchair. The fabric was worn thin on one arm where his elbow used to rest. I laid my hand there and closed my eyes. "They don't see me anymore, Derek," I whispered. "I'm here, but I'm not real to them." Outside, snow had begun to fall, soft and slow, covering the driveway, the porch, the world. I thought about Caroline's voice, "Hope you understand," and how much it had cost me not to reply. Not because I didn't have words. I had too many. But none that could change anything. The pie sat in the fridge. The roast would keep another day. The green beans were already in the trash. I got up, walked to the window, and watched the snow pile up around my little mailbox. The one with peeling blue paint and a crooked flag. The one I'd kept all these years because Derek built it with his hands, even if the hinges always stuck. Maybe it was time I let that stickiness go. Maybe it was time I stopped folding napkins for people who couldn't say thank you. It was just after midnight when I heard the soft shuffle of feet down the hallway. At first I thought I imagined it. This house hadn't known footsteps besides mine in so long. But then a knock, gentle and hesitant, tapped against the kitchen door I'd closed earlier. "Grandma?" "Max." I opened the door to find him standing there in socks and an oversized hoodie, his hair tousled from the road. In his hand was a half-empty bottle of water, the label peeling off. He looked at the table, then back at me. "Why'd you put everything away?" he asked quietly. "I thought we were going to eat together." I studied his face. 17, almost grown, taller than his father already, but still with that look, the same one he had as a boy when he broke the window with a baseball and tried to tape it back together before I noticed. "You didn't seem hungry," I said. He shifted his weight, embarrassed. "We weren't. Not then. But I kinda wish we hadn't stopped." I didn't respond right away. I just pulled out a chair and gestured for him to sit. I reheated the pie in the microwave, poured him some milk, and watched as he took a bite, slower this time. No rush, no noise. "This is really good," he mumbled with his mouth full. "It was supposed to be for all of you." He nodded, eyes low. "I know." Silence stretched between us. Not uncomfortable, just full. The kind that holds things no one said yet. "Mom didn't mean to be rude," he said. "She's just always, you know." "I know." He looked up at me. "She works too much. She's tired all the time. And Martin, he never wants to stop anywhere too long." "I know, Max." He finished the slice and stood up, rinsed the plate without me asking. That small gesture, not grand, not loud, pierced deeper than any apology. "I wish we stayed longer," he said. "So do I." He paused at the doorway. "Thanks for the pie." Then he disappeared into the dark hallway again, and I stood there in the quiet, the warmth of the microwave still lingering in the air. The next morning, they were gone. I didn't hear the car start. No knock, no goodbye. Just a note left on the hallway table in Caroline's handwriting. "Thanks for having us, Mom. The kids loved seeing you. Sorry it was so quick. We'll plan better next time. Love, C." Next time. There's always a next time in Caroline's world. It floats like a promise, but lands like an excuse. I folded the note and slipped it into the drawer by the fridge. The same drawer where I kept takeout menus, expired coupons, and things I didn't have the heart to throw away. And then I saw it. A piece of paper folded in thirds, stained at one edge. The original estimate for Caroline's down payment. My signature in the corner, firm and proud. I remembered the way she hugged me after, the tears in her eyes. "You saved us, Mom." Saved. That word had felt like a medal then. Today, it felt like a receipt. I opened my checkbook and stared at the last stub. The balance was healthy. I wasn't broke. But that wasn't the point. The point was, I didn't remember the last time someone asked me what I needed. Max's face came back to me, the way he looked at the pie. The quiet way he said, "I wish we stayed." One voice in a room full of silence. I picked up the phone and dialed the bank. The hold music played quietly in my ear. Some gentle instrumental thing meant to soothe. But I wasn't soothed. I sat at the kitchen table with my notepad open, pen poised. The list from the night before was still visible underneath. What I've given. I flipped to a new page. When the bank clerk picked up, her voice was bright and polite. "Good morning, Vermont Community Bank. This is Cheryl. How may I assist you today?" "Yes, hello," I said, steadying my voice. "My name is Joyce Holloway. I'd like to review the standing transfers and automatic payments associated with my checking account." "Of course, Mrs. Holloway. I'll just need to verify your identity." I answered the usual questions. Last 4 digits, mother's maiden name, the street I lived on for over 50 years, and then waited as Cheryl typed. "You have a few recurring payments?" she said. "Would you like me to list them?" "Yes, please." She read them out one by one. The $1 $200 monthly deposit to Caroline and Martin's joint account, labeled Family Support. The quarterly tuition contribution for Lily's arts program. The automatic car insurance payment for Max's vehicle. A few others I'd almost forgotten. Small transfers to help with Caroline's home repairs, a health insurance premium she once couldn't cover, a student loan payment that had supposedly slipped through the cracks. "Would you like to make changes to any of these?" Cheryl asked. I looked down at the paper, at my own handwriting, at the word support. "I'd like to suspend all outgoing payments," I said. "Effective immediately." There was a pause. "All of them?" "Yes." "Understood. I'll place temporary holds while we generate the paperwork. You'll need to come in to finalize everything. I'll be there tomorrow morning." Cheryl confirmed the appointment and thanked me. I hung up and stared at the receiver for a while. Then I reached for my teacup and took a sip. Cold, but not unpleasant, like something that used to be warm. I'd done the first thing. Now came the second. I opened the folder where I kept my will. I hadn't looked at it in years. It was still in the plastic sleeve the lawyer gave me when Derek died. I'd made it simple. The house and savings split evenly between Caroline and Max. No surprises, no drama. But now I took out a notepad and wrote a name I hadn't written in a long time. Ella Jean Moore. Ella Jean was my best friend's granddaughter. She'd lived 2 doors down for most of her childhood. A sweet, quiet girl who always offered to carry my groceries without being asked. The kind of child who notices when you're tired. When she left for college in Maine, she brought me a homemade jam jar wrapped in brown paper. "You're the only person who ever listened when I talked about books," she said. She wasn't family, but she had sat at this table more times in the last 5 years than my own daughter. I underlined her name. Then I wrote a question next to it. Why does blood get to decide everything? That afternoon, I walked out into the cold. The air smelled like wood smoke and pine. The neighbors' yards were bare, the last of the leaves clinging to branches like stubborn old memories. I walked to the mailbox and dropped in 3 envelopes. 1 to the bank, 1 to my lawyer, and 1 to myself. Yes, to myself. An empty envelope with just my address on the front. A promise to check the mail tomorrow and remember, I'm still here. I still matter. The house was quiet when I returned. The only sound was the clock in the hallway and the occasional sigh of the furnace. I didn't cook dinner that night. I poured myself a bowl of cereal and ate it by the window, watching the sky turn violet over the distant hills. I used to think love was shown through what you gave. Now I was beginning to believe it's also shown by what you stop giving. I didn't expect the silence the next morning to feel so different. It wasn't quieter than usual. No. The house had always held its hush well, like a gentle hand on your shoulder. But today, it wasn't emptiness I felt. It was space. A space I hadn't left for myself in years. I brewed coffee and sat at the kitchen table without a tray, without laying out extra cups or cutting fruit for anyone else. Just 1 mug, 1 plate, 1 person. It felt deliberate, like an act of resistance. By 9:15, I was dressed and outside, scarf wrapped tight around my neck, hair pinned up. I hadn't been to the bank in person since before the pandemic, but I remembered the way. Every corner, every cracked sidewalk square. The young man at the reception desk looked startled when I walked in. "Mrs. Holloway?" he said, rising. "Cheryl's expecting you. Right this way." Cheryl was as kind in person as she'd been on the phone. Younger than I imagined, with round glasses and the kind of soft voice you didn't want to interrupt. She slid the paperwork across the desk, page by page, explaining each one. I signed everything, with a steady hand. Not because I wasn't nervous, I was, but because I knew this wasn't about money. It was about worth. When it was done, Cheryl hesitated. "Can I ask something? Just out of curiosity?" I nodded. "Most of the time, people suspend 1 or 2 transfers. You did all of them." "Yes." "Did something happen?" I looked at her. Not with anger or shame, just the tired honesty of someone who's held too much inside for too long. "They stopped seeing me," I said. "I just finally noticed." Cheryl didn't answer, just nodded once, respectfully. On the way home, I stopped by the hardware store. I needed new light bulbs, and the back fence had been sagging since July. I picked out a few things, chatted with the clerk about the frost coming in next week, and walked home carrying the bag like it weighed nothing at all. When I stepped into the kitchen, the phone was already ringing. Caroline. I let it ring twice before answering. Mom? Her voice had that tight edge, like she was trying to sound calm but had skipped a breath. I just checked the account. The transfer didn't come through. Is everything okay? Everything's fine. There was a pause. I mean, did you forget? I know sometimes online stuff can be. I didn't forget. Another pause. Longer. You canceled it? Yes. Why? Not angry yet? Not shocked, just confused, as if it hadn't even occurred to her that the faucet might stop running someday. I've decided to rethink some things. Mom, she said, her tone sharpening, we count on that money. You know that. The mortgage. The kids' programs. Max's school bill is due next month. I'm aware. You didn't even warn me. No, I said, I didn't. She was quiet for a beat, then added, softer, did we do something? That question, that innocent plea, as if it all came down to a single act, as if the meal I cooked, and they skipped, was a standalone moment, not a culmination. I just needed to start treating myself with the same care I've given everyone else, I said. There was nothing harsh in my voice. No anger, no drama, just truth. I don't understand, Caroline whispered. I know, I said. I didn't either, for a long time. She exhaled, sharp, uneven, and then hung up. I stood there for a moment, the dial tone humming in my ear, then returned the receiver to its cradle. The table was bare. No lists, no plates. I picked up the hardware store bag and went to fix the back fence. One screw at a time. I made myself dinner that night. Not leftovers. Not something that would keep for guests. Not Max's favorite or Caroline's comfort food. Just mine. A simple lentil stew, the way my mother used to make it in winter, thick with carrots and celery and a splash of vinegar at the end. I even toasted some sourdough with too much butter just because I wanted the smell. I didn't set the table. I ate at the small counter by the window, elbows on the surface, a book beside my plate, the way I used to before Derek's heart gave out and life got rearranged. It wasn't joy, exactly, but it felt like breathing after holding my breath too long. When I finished eating, I lit a candle on the table. No reason, just the glow. And then I sat there, watching it flicker, listening to the wind pressing against the windows. There was something old and holy in the stillness. Then the doorbell rang. I almost didn't answer. People rarely came unannounced, and I wasn't in the mood for anyone who started with, "Sorry to drop by." But when I opened the door, there she was. Nancy Prentice, my neighbor from 2 houses over. Always with red lipstick and a scarf in her hair, even if she was just out walking her dog. Well, hello, she said, holding a Tupperware container. I made too much squash casserole. Thought maybe you'd take some off my hands. She didn't ask if I was busy. She just stepped inside like we used to do in the old days, when people brought pie instead of text messages. I took the dish and led her to the kitchen. Smells like stew in here, she said, sniffing. Real stew, not that salty stuff from a can. I smiled. It was for me this time. Nancy sat down, eyeing me. You look different. Not sick. Just less folded. I laughed despite myself. That's a new one. She waved a hand. I mean it. Something shifted. What happened? I didn't launch into the story. I didn't need to. Nancy had raised 3 kids of her own, and her oldest hadn't visited in 2 years. She knew the quiet punishments of motherhood. "They came and went," I said simply. "Didn't eat, didn't stay," and I didn't say a word. Nancy nodded slowly, and that was louder than any shouting. We drank tea. She told me about her youngest grandson's latest tantrum and how her back was screaming like an old hinge. And we sat there, 2 women with our years like heavy coats, not complaining, just wearing them. When she left, I walked her to the door. "You know," she said, pausing on the porch, "I always thought you gave too much." "So did I said, but I only just admitted it. Back inside, I rinsed the mugs and set them on the drying rack. Then I stood in the doorway of the living room and looked around. Not with dissatisfaction, but curiosity, like I was seeing it for the first time in years. The Afghan on the couch, the crooked family portraits, the stack of unopened holiday cards on the mantel, the clock that ran 10 minutes slow. I moved toward the shelf where the photo albums were, opened the thickest one. Page after page of Caroline's childhood. Her dance recitals, birthday cakes, awkward teenage smiles. One photo made me pause. Me and Derek, sitting on the floor beside a 4-year-old Caroline, helping her unwrap a puzzle. My hair was darker then, tied back with a ribbon. My hands rested gently on Caroline's back, as if I was making sure she didn't tip too far into the joy. I closed the album. I'd been carrying those years like evidence, proof of love, of sacrifice, of trying. But maybe it was time to stop proving. Maybe it was enough just to be. The next morning, I took down the curtains in the living room, not because they were dirty, though they probably were, but because they were beige. A dull, apologetic beige I had never liked but kept because neutral goes with everything. With what, exactly? The silence? The smallness I'd folded myself into? I replaced them with an old pair I'd found in the hall closet. Deep green, patterned with vines. Derek used to call them the jungle curtains and rolled his eyes every time I brought them up. "Too loud," he said. But today, that was the point. I wanted color. I wanted something that said, "This is my home, and I'm still alive in it." I stood back, arms crossed, and looked at the room. The green clashed with the old carpet, but I didn't care. It clashed, and I liked it. Then I picked up the phone and called the painter whose card had been on my fridge since 2019. He remembered me, even joked about the cookies I'd once given his crew. I told him I was finally ready to repaint the kitchen. "What color you thinking, Mrs. Holloway?" he asked. "Not white," I said. "That's all I know." He laughed. "We'll work with that." I hung up, satisfied. In the afternoon, I baked a pear tart, not because anyone was coming, but because I had pears going soft, and I liked the smell of cinnamon in the house. I played music too, an old blues record Derek never could stand. He used to call it sad kitchen noise. But I danced to it right there in my socks, the oven warming my back, the record scratching like a memory that didn't know when to quit. Around 4, the phone rang. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered. "Mom?" Caroline's voice, tighter than yesterday. "Can we talk?" "We're talking. I don't understand what's going on." "I know." A pause. "Are you angry?" "No." Another pause. I could almost hear her organizing her words, the way she did as a teenager when she knew she was cornered. "Max told me he talked to you after dinner." "He did." "He said you looked sad." "I was tired." She sighed, like she was the one carrying something heavy. "I feel like this is about more than just dinner." "It is." Silence again. I didn't know you were upset, Mom. You never said anything. And there it was. The line I'd waited for. The line I used to tell myself. If it mattered that much, you would have spoken up. I sat down on the couch. That's the thing, I said. I was so busy making sure everyone else had what they needed, I forgot I was allowed to need something too. She didn't respond, and I didn't fill the silence. I'm not punishing you, I added. I'm just done erasing myself to make everyone else more comfortable. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet. So what happens now? You live your life, and I live mine. And maybe we find a way to meet in the middle, but only if it's not one-sided. She didn't argue. For once, she didn't rush to smooth things over. I have to go, she said finally. Lily's violin lesson? I hope she plays something she likes, I said. She hung up. I put the phone down and looked at the pear tart cooling on the counter. Then I cut myself a slice and brought it into the living room, sat on the couch, turned on the radio, let the soft voice of a jazz singer fill the air, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in my own company, not alone, just mine. It was around 7 when the call came in. I was in the middle of folding laundry, just 2 small loads, but even that felt like a lot these days. My back ached the way it always did when the weather changed, and I'd just told myself I deserved to sit down when the phone rang again. Martin. Caroline's husband never called. If his name showed up on my screen, it was either a misdial or a favor. I let it ring once before picking up. Joyce? His voice was always overly formal, even now, even after 21 years in the family. Sorry to bother you at this hour. Not a bother. There was a pause, just long enough to mean something. Then, I understand you've suspended the monthly transfer. Yes. Well, I'm hoping this isn't permanent. Caroline's very upset. I'm sure. She said you've been feeling disregarded. I held the phone tighter, not hurt, just bracing. That's one way to put it. Martin cleared his throat. Look, I don't want to wade into things between you and Caroline, but we've built our financial structure around some of those contributions. Especially with Max's upcoming college payments. I understand, Martin. So, are you open to resuming them? Even partially? No. Another pause. This one longer, less polished. I don't think you understand what this puts us in, he said. I understand exactly, I replied. I've been understanding for a long time. He shifted tactics. You're upset, and rightfully so, if you felt overlooked. But the kids, they're not children anymore. He fell silent. I'm not mad, Martin, I added, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. I'm just done funding a version of the family where I'm a footnote. There was nothing left to say. He didn't thank me for my time. He didn't say goodbye. Just the click of the line going dead. I stared at the receiver. Then I put the laundry away and made myself some tea. Chamomile with honey. No sugar. I liked it the way it was. A little bitter, a little quiet. I thought the evening was done, but the doorbell rang an hour later. No one rings that late in our neighborhood unless it's an emergency. I pulled my cardigan tighter and walked to the door. It was Lily. 16, with that look of a girl caught between being adored and dismissed, both by people too busy to notice her. She stood there in her hoodie and boots, holding a canvas tote bag and blinking up at me like she wasn't sure I'd actually open the door. Hi, Grandma. Lily, what on earth? I didn't want to be home. I opened the door wider. Come in. She walked past me without a word and dropped her bag on the rug. She looked around, as if something had changed in the house since her last visit. Maybe it had. Maybe it was me. Mom's yelling, she said finally. Dad's being a jerk. Max locked himself in his room. I nodded, waiting. She looked at me then, really looked. I didn't know you made all that food. I didn't reply. I saw the roast in the fridge. And the pie. Max told me you were upset. That he came in late and you still made him pie. I didn't make it for him, I said gently. I made it for whoever was hungry. Lily sat down at the table. Can I stay here tonight? My chest ached, not from anger or pride, but something far older. Of course, I said. She smiled, then added, Do you still have pie? I did. Lily fell asleep on the couch with her socks half off and a book still open on her chest. I covered her with the old quilt, the blue one from the attic, stitched with stars, and sat for a while just watching her breathe. There was something strange about that night. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet in a new way. Not emptiness, not waiting, just life, finally settling into the corners of this house again. I turned off the lights and left the living room door cracked, the way I used to when she was little and afraid of the dark. In the morning, I woke up early. The sun hadn't fully risen, but the sky outside was warming, pale blue filtering through the green curtains. I made coffee, cut 2 slices of toast, and stood at the counter with the kettle in my hand, realizing I felt something that had eluded me for a long time. Control. Not over anyone else, not even over Lily asleep in the other room, but over myself. My words. My yes and no. The borders of my own life. Lily shuffled into the kitchen just after 8. Her hair was a mess, her eyes still half shut. I smell toast. You do. She smiled, sleep soft. Can I have some? You can have all of it. She sat, legs crossed under her, and looked around like she was seeing the kitchen for the first time. It's nice in here in the morning, she said. At our house, it's just cereal and yelling. Sounds exhausting. It is. She ate in silence, and I didn't rush her. After breakfast, I walked out to check the mailbox. Just a few envelopes, catalogs, a flyer, and 1 thick white envelope from my lawyer's office. I held it in my hands like it was heavier than paper. Inside, the updated draft of my will and the preliminary paperwork for the living trust. I tucked it under my arm and returned to the kitchen. Lily was rinsing her plate. Do you want to help me with something? I asked. She turned. Sure. I set the folder on the table and opened it, sliding the papers across. I'm making a trust, I said. For later. For when I'm not here. Her eyes widened. Grandma, no, I said quickly. Not because anything's wrong, because I want things in order. She nodded, warily. I'm leaving something to Max, and to you. Some things to the library. And I've added someone else, too. Someone else? A young woman who isn't family, but who never made me feel invisible. Lily didn't say anything. I wanted you to know, I added, because it might surprise your parents later. Still, she said nothing, but her expression was changing. Do they know? Not yet. I bet they'll be mad. Maybe, I said, but it's not their decision. She stared at the papers for a long time. Then finally, quietly, You're the only one who listens to me, Grandma. My heart pulled, gently, not painfully. I know, sweetheart. She looked up. I don't want your money. I know that too. But it means something, that you'd trust me. I reached across the table and took her hand. I trust you because you see me, not because you're mine. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Just the sound of the old fridge humming in the corner, the wind brushing against the window panes. "I should probably go back soon," Lily said, "or they'll freak out." I nodded. "Take your time." But she didn't rush. She sat there with me a while longer, finishing her tea, watching the snow start again. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew something had shifted. Not just in me, but in her too. And that, for once, felt like enough. The snow fell heavier by mid-afternoon, a steady hush blanketing the street and muting the world outside. Lily had already gone, bundled into her jacket, tote bag over one shoulder, the last slice of pear tart wrapped in foil in her hand. She'd promised to text when she got home. I knew she would. It was Thanksgiving. Not that anyone had said so out loud. Caroline hadn't called. Neither had Martin. I suppose they assumed I'd understand, that I'd imagine some excuse. A flat tire, a last-minute emergency, maybe just a long nap, the way I always had before. But this time, I didn't imagine anything. I just put on my coat and walked into town. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that only comes when most people are indoors, huddled around tables, carving turkeys, and pouring gravy. My boots crunched softly through the snow. The bakery was closed, the florist dark. Even the diner had its chairs stacked. Only the church on Main Street was open, the lights on in the basement fellowship hall. When I stepped inside, the warmth hit me first. Then the smell. Roasted vegetables, cornbread, apples, and cloves. I heard voices, laughter, clinking silverware. The town's annual Friendsgiving, for those without plans, without families, or without invitations. A volunteer greeted me at the door with a gentle smile. "Welcome," she said, not asking why I was there, not offering pity. Just a plate and a place to sit. I found a spot near the back, next to a woman who introduced herself as Janine. She was 73, lived on the other side of the river, and had been coming to this dinner since her divorce way back in '91. Her earrings were big and her stories were bigger. I liked her immediately. We talked between bites. About the weather, about old television shows, about how her cat had taken to stealing gloves from her neighbor's porch. She didn't ask if I had children, and I didn't offer. A man from the Lions Club brought refills of cider, his hands shaking slightly from age. The boy next to him had Down syndrome and beamed at every guest as he passed, like we were the most important people in the world. I stayed longer than I'd planned, helped stack chairs, wiped down a few tables. No one asked me to. But it felt good to move, to contribute without expectation. When I finally stepped back outside, the sky was already dimming. The street lamps flickered on one by one, casting soft pools of amber light onto the snow. I walked home slowly, letting the cold bite at my cheeks. At the porch, I paused before going inside. From this angle, the house looked smaller than I remembered, but warmer. Not because it had changed, but because I had. It wasn't a waiting room anymore. It wasn't a stage for someone else's needs. It was mine. Inside, I changed into my softest sweater and brewed more tea. I lit the candle on the mantel, the one I'd saved for Christmas Eve, and turned on the radio, letting it hum quietly in the background. Then I sat in my chair, opened the small notebook I kept for letters I never sent, and began to write. Dear Derek, Thanksgiving came and went. They didn't come, and I didn't wait. That may be the most honest sentence I've written in years. I think you'd be proud of me. Not because I was strong, but because I stopped pretending to be okay with what I never deserved. You always told me I made too many allowances. That love didn't mean disappearing. I didn't believe you then. I think I do now. I stopped writing and leaned back. The snow outside kept falling. The silence inside wasn't lonely. It was mine. I found it the next morning, tucked inside Derek's old toolbox. A postcard, curled at the corners, yellowed just slightly. No stamp, no address. Just a handwritten note on the back in his strong, tidy print. Joyce, you're not here to be convenient. You're here to be whole. It wasn't dated, but I remembered it. He'd left it for me the day after our worst fight. The one about Caroline's endless requests. The one where I'd cried into the sink and he'd gone out for a drive. He came back with coffee and said nothing. But the next morning, I found that card sitting by the toaster. I'd tucked it away. Maybe I wasn't ready for its truth back then. But today, it felt like a benediction. I sat on the floor, surrounded by tools and old screws, the scent of oil and dust in the air, and held that card like a small, holy thing. You're not here to be convenient. You're here to be whole. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't moved, but because the ache wasn't sharp anymore. It had settled into something solid, a knowing. I returned the card to my bedroom and placed it inside the top drawer of my nightstand. Somewhere I could reach for it when needed, not as a relic, but as a reminder. That afternoon I went through the closets. I wasn't purging, not in the dramatic sense. I was just choosing which towels I liked, which mugs, which sweaters I actually wore. I packed a few things into a box marked Community Center and set it by the door. Later, I called the church and asked if the food pantry needed volunteers. The woman on the phone sounded surprised. "Are you sure?" she asked. "It's a lot of lifting sometimes." "I'm strong," I said, and I meant it. That night, I lit the fire. Not for guests, not for show, just for me. I made a grilled cheese sandwich and tomato soup, the kind Caroline always called kid food. I ate slowly, dipped the corners of my sandwich in the bowl, like I used to when I was young and hungry and didn't care what looked proper. Then I pulled out a crossword and filled in a few squares before falling asleep in Derek's chair. Blanket over my knees, the fire humming like an old lullaby. And somewhere around midnight, I woke to a single thought. Not guilt, not anger, but this. It was never about them noticing me. It was about me noticing myself. I rose, turned off the lamp, and walked to the bedroom, the postcard's words still echoing as I slipped under the quilt. I started waking up earlier, not because I had appointments or people to cook for, but because the morning felt like mine again. The quiet hours before the phone could ring, before the news began rattling from the radio, before the world pushed in with its needs. I stretched slowly at the foot of the bed. 10 minutes, just as the doctor once suggested, but I never had time for. My knees cracked, my shoulder ached, but still, I moved. My body was old, not broken. There's a difference. The kitchen felt different too. Not because anything had changed. The same chipped counter, the same dent in the floorboard near the stove. But because I walked into it with new rules. I no longer asked, "What should I make if they come by?" I asked, "What do I want today?" That morning, it was pancakes. Just 2, with the last of the blueberries I'd frozen in August. I made them small, the way Derek liked, but this time I added cinnamon, the way I liked. And I didn't apologize to the empty room. I spent the day moving through the house like someone settling into a place they've owned forever, but never truly claimed. I rearranged the living room, pulled the old armchair closer to the window, so I could read in the light. Took down a few of the framed school portraits, not out of spite, but because they no longer comforted me. Some people leave furniture to their children. I decided I'd leave space. Space that wasn't burdened with old expectations. Space that felt like breath. Around noon, I walked to the post office and mailed a letter. It wasn't long. Just a note to Lily. You are seen. You are enough. I'm proud of the person you're becoming. Not because of what you'll do, but because of who you already are. Keep that fire. It will save you. I didn't sign it love, Grandma. I signed it with respect, Joyce. Because that's what I was learning. Love given freely is good, but love given with respect is the only kind that sustains. On my way home, I stopped at the fabric store. I hadn't sewn in years, but suddenly I wanted to. Not a quilt, not anything to pass down. Just something for the windows in the back room. Something floral and ridiculous. The girl behind the counter asked if I had a project in mind. No, I said. I just want something that makes me smile when the sun hits it. She grinned. That's the best reason. Back home, I cut the fabric and pinned it by hand. I hummed without meaning to. The same tune I used to sing to Caroline when she was small and feverish, curled in my lap. And as I worked, I thought about all the days I'd filled with someone else's preferences. All the casseroles made without mushrooms. All the shirts ironed because someone liked sharp creases. All the decisions paused until others gave their blessing. No more. I was done waiting to be consulted about how to live inside my own life. That evening, I watched the sky darken from my new chair by the window. The hills folded into the dusk, and the air turned glassy with cold. Somewhere across town, Caroline was probably setting the table. Or maybe she wasn't. Maybe they were ordering in. Maybe she was texting someone about what an impossible woman her mother had become. It didn't matter. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't listening for the sound of a car pulling up my driveway. I wasn't listening at all. I was being. They arrived without warning. No text. No call. Just the sound of tires on gravel and the jolt in my chest that followed. I was in the garden, clearing out the last of the frost-bitten herbs, hands in soil, sweater sleeves rolled to the elbows. I heard the car door slam and stood slowly, brushing dirt from my palms. It was Caroline, Martin behind her, silent and stiff. Max stepping out slowly, eyes down. Lily, last, half hiding behind the car, arms crossed. I didn't move. Caroline approached first, her heels sinking slightly into the soft ground. She looked good, neat, polished, exhausted. She always looked exhausted now. We were in the area, she said. You weren't. She flinched, not visibly, but I saw it, a flicker behind the eyes. I thought maybe we could talk. You're here, that's talking. She glanced at the house. Can we come in? No. The word surprised even me, how calmly it came out. No anger, no tremble. Just fact. I have guests, I added. Martin shifted. Guests? Yes. It was true. Janine from the church was inside, helping me sort books for the donation drive. Nancy was due over soon with scones. The house wasn't empty anymore. Not today. I didn't know you had people over, Caroline said. No one knows what I do anymore. That's the point. She tried again. Can we just sit for a minute? I stepped aside and gestured toward the porch chairs. Outside. They filed up like a group visiting a museum they weren't sure they wanted to see. Max sat quickly. Lily hovered, then followed. Caroline remained standing. This doesn't feel like you, she said. It feels exactly like me, I answered. You just haven't seen me in a while." She bit her lip. "Is this because of the money?" "No. But it's because I made a life and you didn't notice. So I stopped leaving the door open for people who walk past without looking in." Silence, except for the wind, the creak of the porch rail. Lily spoke next. "I told them to come," she said quietly. "I thought maybe you'd want that." I looked at her. She looked back, unsure but steady. "I appreciate that," I said. "But this visit isn't about what I want." Carolyn exhaled. "What do you want then?" Such a simple question, one I'd been too afraid to answer most of my life. "I want peace in my own home. I want to make choices without apology. I want to be seen without earning it through giving. I want honesty. And right now, I want you to leave." She blinked, stunned, not angry. Max stood up slowly. "I'm sorry, Grandma." I nodded. "I know." Lily followed. She didn't say anything this time, just came close and placed something in my hand. A folded note, soft and warm, from her pocket. Then she stepped down from the porch and waited by the car. Caroline didn't move for a long moment. Then she said, "You've changed." "Yes," I said. "And I hope someday you do too." She turned without a word. I didn't watch them drive away. I just opened Lily's note and read, "You taught me what respect looks like. I see you now." Inside the house, the kettle began to whistle, and I didn't rush to turn it off. The snow came again that night. Soft, steady, no wind. The kind of snow that doesn't ask for attention, just lays itself over the world like a quiet truth. I watched it from the chair by the window, wrapped in Derek's old cardigan. Lily's note still folded beside me on the armrest. The house was still. No footsteps upstairs, no humming fridge. I'd unplugged it for defrosting earlier and forgotten to turn it back on. And I didn't mind. Let the ice melt. Let things shift. I thought about how many years I'd spent preparing for people who never asked to be prepared for. How often I'd tidied myself, my words, my emotions, my time, into neat boxes so they'd be easier to ignore. But now there were crumbs on the kitchen counter, books in piles, a curtain crooked where I'd hung it too fast, and every bit of it felt like home. Janine had called earlier to thank me for the books. Nancy left a message about the next meeting at the food pantry. Ella Jean, the girl from next door who used to help with groceries, sent a postcard from Portland with a picture of her and her girlfriend in matching scarves. There was no parade, no celebration, just presents. I thought about Caroline, about Max and Lily, about what families do when they don't know how to be tender. They take, they assume, they turn love into transaction. But I no longer needed to cash out of that currency. Love, if it was real, would come without receipt. I stood, stretched, and walked into the kitchen. The pear tart dish still sat in the sink, half washed. I finished it, dried it, and tucked it away. Then I went to the small drawer by the door and opened it. Inside was the envelope I'd mailed to myself days ago. No return address, no message. Just a blank sheet inside. I took it out, sat down, and wrote on it in thick, slow pen. I am not an afterthought. I folded it again and slid it back into the envelope, sealing it shut. A small act, but mine. Outside, the street was empty. No cars, no visitors. But the porch light was on, because sometimes being seen doesn't start with someone else. It starts when you choose not to dim yourself any longer. And if you've read this far, maybe you needed that reminder too. If this story touched you, share it. Leave a comment. Let someone know they're not alone in wanting more than silence.